Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Sheldon-Feld with the International Grief Institute, and this is Moments of Hope. Tonight, our guest is Joanne Fink. Joanne is the founder of Zenspirations, and in 2011, 2 days before their son's 12th birthday, Joanne's husband, Andy, died suddenly of a heart attack. Welcome to the show, Joanne.
Thank you, Linda. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And so you are a widow.
I am.
And like most widows and widowers, you don't expect to become a widow. So take us back to when Andy died. It was 2011, 2 days before your youngest, your son, Jonathan. It was 2 days before his 12th birthday, and Andy died. What went through your mind?
Total disbelief, shell shock, Andy lay down to take a nap and had a heart attack. And when I went to wake him up for dinner, he was cold. And I knew he was gone. And he was only 53.
Wow.
I did not know how to handle it. I was so totally unprepared. And I don't even remember most of the first 6 months after he died, because it was just a day by day, sometimes an hour by hour survival. If I hadn't had to get out of bed to get the kids off to school, I don't think that I would have gotten out of bed at all, because I was that dysfunctional.
Yeah. Actually, that was how it was for me as well. When I lost our daughter, same thing. I was in a fog of shock for a very long time. And so, it's now been 7 years since you lost Andy. And at the time he passed, you were the founder of Zenspirations. And for our viewers who are not familiar with Zenspirations, Joanne, you've done illustrations and artwork that are sold and licensed to the gift industry and elsewhere. You've done books, you've done coloring books, you've done all kinds of things. People can find your books and such on patterning and drawing and such in Michael's and Walmart and around the world. And Andy was the kind of that anchor as your business manager. And suddenly you don't have him anymore to guide you, to guide your business. And you were tasked with raising these two teenagers, because your oldest was a teenager. And then you had Jonathan also, who, just turning 12. What was that like for a widow, from the widow perspective?
In a very real sense, my life ended when Andy died, because the life that we had together, he was my business partner, my kid care, my IT director, my finance person. We were married 29 years. I never wrote a check before he died. Oh. There were things that he did and things that I did, and some crossed over, but a lot of them I had no clue. I guess clueless is part of how things were for me. And I think grief brain is a very real thing. Grief impacts us not just emotionally, but physically as well. And cognitively,
It sure does.
Yeah. It does. And I think I have had to reinvent myself. My daughter wrote a song about her dad, and some of the words are, "You're everything I see, not just a memory. You will live through me. I am your legacy."
Oh my goodness.
And those words are so powerful and so beautiful. I can't listen to the song without crying. But everything that I have done pretty much since Andy died, I try to do to honor his memory. He was an incredible father. We met when I was 18. He's the love of my life and still is. And I know a lot of people, once they're widowed, try to continue their partner's passions and Andy's a part of everything that I do, and there is still a connection. I remember the very first night. I used to every night tuck Jonathan in and say prayer and then say, Mommy and Daddy and Samantha, I love you. And that first night, I didn't know what to say. I mean, how do you handle that? And it just came out, Mommy and Daddy and Samantha, I love you. And I still say that to this day, and it's true. I did not know before he died that love is a force so powerful that it transcends physical presence and that it's eternal. And there's a connection that we have that has really given me strength over the last 7 years.
Beautiful, beautiful, and well said. You are Jewish. Mm-hmm. So how has your Jewish faith supported you in this? Do you feel it has supported you?
I learned the blessing of community after Andy died, that we have a ritual called sitting Shiva. Shiva comes from the root word Sheva, which is 7 in Hebrew. And you observe a period of mourning for 7 days. And the community came out in force. It was very interesting. They sent food. They came. They ate food. They bothered me enough that I had to be present. Like I could not hole up in my bedroom. And there were times that I wanted to, but not enough that I had to do anything but focus on adjusting to the new reality of trying to figure out which end was up without Andy. I'm a person who walks in faith and always have been. And I don't know how people get through these life-shattering events without the strength that comes from knowing that you're not alone, that you're part of something bigger than just you, and the hope that tomorrow will be better or next year will be better, that it won't always feel as intensely painful as it does now. And here I am 7 years down the road, and I don't want to say that I don't have days that are really hard, because I do, but they are fewer and further between than in the beginning when I was totally dysfunctional.
And so in the early days, did you feel hopeless? Did you ever dream that pain, that agony that ran so deep, for which there's no words, did you ever feel that might one day not be so raw? What kept you going? And I realize that's 2 questions, but I think it's hard for people to imagine a life that's going to be less painful than it is when you're in those, that early stage.
I think part of that is having faith and the ability to believe that you are resilient enough to transition, to triumph over circumstances. I also learned that, joy and sorrow can be felt simultaneously.
Very true.
That I miss Andy terribly, and that is a very real hole in my heart still, and most likely forever. That doesn't go away. But I've learned how to focus on meaningful ways of keeping his memory alive and making a difference in the world, because that is something that was important to him.
And so do you, how do you are, just a classic example of grace. And how do you handle it when people are well-meaning and they say things that they think might help you, like, you know, are you going to date again? When are you going to date again? I've got, you know, cousin Fred that's single. How do you handle things like that? Because that would seem very, very hard. You know, Andy's your husband, and even in death, you don't part. And so how do you handle things like that with grace?
I choose to believe that everybody is doing their best under the circumstances that they are living in, and that nobody is saying anything to me to hurt me. And therefore, it's all done with the best intentions and usually with love. And although I have not started to date yet, and I'm not really interested in dating, it doesn't hurt. You know, it makes me feel loved when someone says, "Are you ready? Are you interested? I'll introduce you." I know they care about me. I remember right after Andy died, and people came over and would say, "I know how you feel." And this upset my daughter tremendously. She would say to me, "They don't know how I feel. How could they know how I feel?" And they don't, you know how she felt. They can only imagine how they would feel in a similar situation, or perhaps they are a lost survivor themselves. But everybody's grief journey is different.
Right. It's not one size fits all.
Right. But I work with a lot of people who are widowed and try and give them tools for coping with difficult questions. And what I say is, I don't think you know how I feel, but I appreciate your expression of sympathy. If you feel that you have to correct them at all, I would just say, thank you for caring.
Yeah. Well said, because they do mean well.
They do.
It really comes from a heart of caring. They just, oftentimes, it's hard for people who have not been through profound loss it's hard for them to see us in such pain. It's human nature to want to fix it.
Right. And this is not fixable. You can't bring the person back.
No.
And what's really hard is to be able to grieve with someone. You know, I heard Alan Peterson say once that the best words you can say are, "We are here to hurt with you." And just be there. You don't have to say anything. Sometimes hugs are great help. I like hugs, that physical presence. And being a widow, you know, that is something I really miss. When Andy died, you know, I slept for 29 years hugging his back. And so the way that I was able to go to sleep was no longer available to me.
Right.
And I think probably for the first 2 or 3 months, I didn't sleep at all. And my daughter, who was 17, finally took me to Bed Bath & Beyond and got me one of those big pillows. The
body pillows?
Yeah. And during the day, it decorated the bed, and at night I turned it sideways, and somehow just having that lump in bed made a difference.
Oh my goodness.
Beautiful. Know, I think when you've lost a spouse, especially for a woman who lost her husband, there are a lot of ancillary losses. You know, there's loss of income, there's loss of your future. There's often, as in my case, we couldn't afford to stay in our home. And so a year after Andy died, we moved to a smaller home in the next town because I wanted to stay in the same school district. And for a lot of widows, they lose their support system because couple friends are uncomfortable with a single person. And people don't want to talk about death and dying. They think it's contagious or something. And it's a rare person who can be a companion to the bereaved.
Yes, to just hold that sacred space. You're right. And so you know, becoming a widow, and I have to say that, you know, as a bereaved parent, many people, you know, give all the respect in the world to bereaved parents. But to some degree, I think people who are a widow or widower, um, some people think, oh, well, they lost their spouse, you know, they can fall in love again, or this, that, or the other. And I think that, you know, the respect due to widow and widowers is something that our culture can really step up a notch. And so with that being said, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges facing widows today? And was this something that you faced 7 years ago? And if so, has it changed?
I think the biggest challenge on a lot of levels is feeling lonely. That when your life's partner, who, you know, was the wind beneath your wings and your security blanket all rolled up into one and your confidant, etc., when they're not there anymore, you don't have anybody to brainstorm with or to talk to in a way. And if you have not experienced profound loss, which I define as the loss of part of your immediate family that you live with, so a child, God forbid, you know, for my children who lost a custodial parent, you know, they were home and, you know, there's a hole in our household because Andy wasn't there anymore to pick them up from school, or, you know, all the things that he used to do. Or a spouse, you know, they say losing a spouse is on the Richter scale of emotional challenges the number one challenge. The number two, I think I've heard, is divorce. And there's, you know, 30-point difference between them.
Right.
And I think there's so many challenges when you lose your spouse. You have to regain your equilibrium. You have to figure out how to support yourself, you know, and take care of the house. I had no idea how to take care of anything in my house. You know, Andy did all of that. I am not mechanically inclined, and I couldn't turn the computers on. I couldn't run the garbage disposal when it broke, you know, everything. So lots of little things that today I am competent to know what's going on in my house here because I'm more present to that. And also, I don't have anyone to share that responsibility with. You know, at this point, I'm an empty nester as of last year, and that's been a hard transition for me because, you know, I have married friends who say they're empty nesters. They're not alone, you know, they have each other. And when you're widowed, you come home to an empty house. And that can be isolating. And you have to, you know, when I'm feeling a little bit down or sorry for myself, I always pick up the phone and call somebody who's going through a challenge. Because I think when we reach out to others, we help our own souls heal. And I know that the minute I am able to just reach out in love and try and help somebody else, I feel better. And so I have a long list of people that I check in with. And once you get past what I call, you know, immediate grief, you know, where you can't focus on anything else, I think the best thing you can do is volunteer or do nice things for other people.
I agree. I don't even think you have to lose someone, you know, a profound loss to do that. And I'm a big fan of when we help others, it helps our own heart to heal. So absolutely. And so with the challenges that you faced when you lost Andy, have you surprised yourself and how much you have grown in the things that you've been able to do?
You know, I channel Andy when I need to fix the computer. But there are things, that when I did the insurance policy for the house for the first time, I mean, there's so many things that I had never done before. I had to buy a car a year after he died. I'd never bought a car by myself before. I had no idea what to look for in a car other than making sure I could see over the steering wheel. That was a triumph, getting through things that I would not have chosen to do by myself, but I did them. And I think you discover an inner strength when you lose someone you love and you have to transition, on some level, you don't really have a choice. But I think it's okay to pat yourself on the back and celebrate the fact that you did this.
Yeah.
You stepped up to the plate and you learned what you had to know. Like, I know a lot more about computers now than I did before Andy died because it was a necessity. I am now a whiz at Photoshop, and he would be really proud.
I love that. I love that. And so, how do you think you've changed in the 7 years?
Well, first of all, I am a much, much more compassionate person than I was before Andy died because I didn't get it. And I think I call it crossing the Great Divide, that once you're on our side of the Great Divide, meaning a loss survivor, you can't go back. And the people on the other side just don't understand. They can't understand.
They can't. Yeah, that's right.
And if you love them, you don't want them to understand because it hurts so much.
Right.
But on this side, I'm much more patient. Doesn't mean I'm patient, but I'm more patient. I appreciate things more.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what matters. And there's a lot of things that used to be really important to me that they just don't matter. They're not in the big picture. What matters are the people that you love and doing things to nurture them and to make a difference in the world, which I try and do through my art. And I've grown tremendously. I have found my voice as an artist and as a writer in the last 7 years. It's not the biggest thing for me. And I'm an illustrator and a lettering artist, and I used to put pen to paper every day. And after Andy died, I didn't pick up a pen probably for 2 months. Oh. And then when I did, that's how hurt I was and how dysfunctional I was. I didn't pick up a pen, which for me is like breathing. This is how I survive, by putting pen to paper. And when I picked up a pen for the first time after Andy died, I wrote the words, "When you lose someone you love," and then I wrote, "There's a hole in your heart that nothing can fill." And the next day I got up and I wrote, "When you lose someone you love," and kept going. And after 10 months, I had a whole bunch of brief journals, and I had never journaled before Andy died. And in Judaism, we have something called an unveiling, which at 1 year after the death, you unveil the headstone. And it marks the end of a certain period of mourning. Okay. And you then walk more fully back into life. And at Andy's unveiling, I made 100 copies of some of these excerpts from my brief journal, which I gave to people. There were not 100 people there, but that was the minimum number I could make. And so many people asked me for another copy that printed 300 copies, and then they were gone. And people kept asking me for this book. And I am a greeting card designer and writer by profession. And so I think in terms of what we call universal truths, that it resonates. And what I put in my book were all the feelings that you have when you lose someone. And have one. And this is a copy of the book, When You Lose Someone You Love. And it's just filled with, different things. When you lose someone you love, sometimes you have to deal with things you've never dealt with before. And this is how I felt. And you feel afraid and overwhelmed. And so these are all feelings that I had that I put into this book, which is a gift of comfort for people who've lost a loved one, because it lets them know that they're not alone in how they feel. I still struggle with sleep. Even after I'm able to sleep, I don't want to go to bed because Andy's not there. And a lot of people who are grieving, whether they're grieving the loss of a spouse or a child or a friend, struggle with sleep.
Yes, that's true.
And in time, grief time is not linear. We don't go from here to here to here in a healing journey. It's all mixed up and different triggers. I see Oreo cookies, which Andy loved, and can have a meltdown. Or I did in the early days have a meltdown every time I went to the supermarket and passed the cookie aisle. I try not to do that these days, but it gets easier with time.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something that we don't talk about very much. But the grocery store is a huge trigger for many bereaved people. And for you, it was foods that Andy loved. And for me, it was foods that my daughter loved. And, understanding how painful seeing a food in a grocery store aisle can be, there's just no words to describe it. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think many people experience that. And when we give them that moment of saying, me too, suddenly people don't feel so crazy. And so thank you for doing that. So, one of the missions of this show is to open the dialogue about grief, because it is a universal experience that transcends all differences. It's been around since the beginning of mankind. But without grief, there'd be no need for hope. And so with hope, also, there is silver linings. And I'm a big fan of there's blessings in everything, even tragedy. And when you lost Andy, you had this thriving business called Zenspirations. And for our viewers, you can Google Zenspirations.com. You can go to Michael's, any store, and see a lot of Joanne's work there. You most likely have come across Joanne's illustrations, in the gift industry, across the board. And so in the years since, because of Andy's death, it's resulted in a silver lining that wouldn't have come about any other way. And for you, Joanne, it's a second business. And so when you started journaling, when you lose someone you love, at the time, you were putting pen to paper as a healing modality. Maybe you didn't recognize it as a healing modality, but it felt good. It felt like a place to release those emotions that are swirling around in your heart and your head. And, getting them out on paper, somewhat cathartic. And yet it birthed a whole new business. And you just released your book, When You Lose Someone You Love. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. And so if anything, I want to give viewers hope that even if they haven't found blessings since losing someone they love or found a silver lining, hold on to the idea that silver linings are there. Because just because you might have not found them doesn't mean they won't reveal themselves. And so thank you for sharing that, because I think about, you didn't sit down to write a book when you lose someone you love. It started as just putting, your emotions down on paper. And here we are 7 years later, a whole new business.
Yep. And I now do a lot of journaling. And I thought, so this is my new book, which is my prayer journal. And it's based on my own personal prayer practice, with spaces to fill things in. And, it's, I don't know what's being seen on the screen, but I was able to take something I'd never done before that I found healing and help other people with it, which has been wonderful. But I think there's always blessings to be found if you look for them. You know, I spent the first week after Andy died thanking God that he didn't suffer.
Yes.
And that he didn't die on Jonathan's birthday.
2 days later. Yeah.
And so those were huge things to be thankful for. And to this day, I am profoundly thankful for them. One of the best blessings that has come out of Andy's not being here is that I have had the opportunity to really be a parent to my children. You know, I used to travel a lot for work, and he was hands-on parent. And the opportunity to get to know my children and to be here for them and to mentor them, you know, I would not have had that if Andy were still here. Now, of course, I'd rather he were still here, but I recognize that the blessing of being a mom is huge.
Right.
And probably the thing I'm most grateful for, because I have two amazing children. And one of the challenges, and I know this doesn't apply to all widows, but for widows with school-age children, there's this big challenge. How do you help your kids grieve when you don't know how to grieve yourself? And so that's really been a long journey for all three of us. And I am so proud of both children because they've worked so hard and they're in good places. And I know Andy's looking down and beaming because they're great kids.
That is just beautiful. Just beautiful. And, you know, I want to take a step back on that because what you said is so profound. You know, we don't know how to help our children because there are no books in school on how to grieve. And even though it's, again, been around since the beginning of mankind, you would think we would be better prepared, and we're not. And that's part of the mission behind what we're doing, is to open that dialogue so future generations can be a little more prepared. And because there's some comfort knowing that it is survivable. It doesn't feel like it when you're in that acute stage, when you're in the beginning months and years of a profound loss. It feels overwhelming, and you are sure that pain is never going to soften. And yet people do survive. And so when we talk about it, we give them hope that if we can survive and find joy and beauty in life, so can they. And so, but what you said, Joanne, about, you know, when Andy died, and Jonathan was 2 days from his 12th birthday. You had Sam, your teenage daughter, and we don't have a guidebook on, you know, there's no playbook on how to grieve, right? And so at first it feels like we are leaving them to their own devices. And I think back on our son, Sean, our youngest, you know, it was a really tough time. And you worry that they're going to go down the wrong path, or they're not going to come out of it okay. And yet both of our sons, your son and my son, are in college doing well. And I think that that's important to share because they were both, Sean was 13 when his sister died. Jonathan was almost 12. Very impressionable ages and, you know, very tender ages. And both of them are doing well. And so I just want to share that with our viewers because I think that is very important, that at the time, not sure how they were going to do, right? And yet,
I'm remembering back to when things were really bad, you know, because communication had shut down. And one of the things that really helped me was connecting with other widows. Because even though you and I both have had profound loss in our lives, it's different. Mm-hmm. And because you've lost a daughter and I've lost a husband, and how that's impacted our daily lives is different. And So connecting with people who are a little ahead of you on your journey, for me, really makes a difference.
It does. When they speak our lost language and we see that they, not only have survived, but been able to restore joy and hope to their world, it gives us hope that we can do the same, even if we don't know how we're going to get from A to B. It gives us hope that it's possible. And I think that that's really, really important. So what if you could go back in time and give words of advice to your former self? What would you say?
Learn how to do the books. For about a year or two after Andy died, I literally went around telling all my married friends to exchange information with each other, because there were so many things that I didn't know, and I was clueless and dysfunctional because I never thought anything would happen to Andy. And he offered to show me how to do our books and stuff. For years, I just wasn't interested. And, I would rather have been designing stuff, and I never thought I would need to know. And if I could tell my pre-grief self, I would have, taken a greater interest and learned more about how to run a house, all the things that I did not know how to do because I was more dysfunctional than was necessary for me to be, because we had a fairly traditional marriage. I did shopping and the cooking, and Andy did a lot of the financial and taking care physically of the house and the grounds. And I think whatever it is, exchanging information with your partner, keeping a list of medications, keeping a list of phone numbers. Like, we were hit by lightning not long after Andy died, and it took
my goodness.
Yeah, it was bad. It took out every electronic thing in the house, from the hot water heater to the garage door opener to the air conditioner, the pool pump. And
goodness.
It was God's way of teaching me how all these things work, because I had to do it. And I mean that. But we'd had the same air conditioning repair person for 19 years, because we lived in our old house 19 years. And his name was Tommy. And I couldn't find his phone number in my, address book, because Andy had filed it under Thomas, T-H. And I was looking under Tommy. And just, I didn't know where to take the car to get it inspected. All these things that you take for granted, but keep a list, exchange information. That's really, and I'm sure there's lots of things that I did then and do now that Andy would be clueless about. So that's my best advice for people who have not lost their spouse. Share and appreciate them.
Well, and thank you for that. I think it's always interesting to look at ourselves 1.0 and 2.0 and, to see how far we've come and what words of advice we'd give 1.0. So final question to you is, what is your definition of hope today?
Hope and faith are very similar to me. Hope is believing that there's the possibility of things improving, and that tomorrow will be better, or at least could be better, and that next month will be even better, and next year there's the possibility of happiness and joy and fulfillment. And I try to keep hope in my heart. I think that hope matters tremendously, because without being able to hope for something different, I think this is where a lot of our suicides are coming from, because people are hopeless. They feel they can't they don't have anything to look forward to.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons I value my friendships so much, because it's my friends who have been my lifeline. And one thing I started doing after Andy died that I never did before, I end almost every conversation by saying, I love you, because I want the person that I'm talking to know I love them. Like I mean that. Yeah. Because you don't know that you'll have a chance to say that again. And I'm so grateful for all the people that have been there for me and have supported me and continue to support me. Some of whom I didn't even know before Andy died. But I am blessed with a wonderful set of friends and a great support system, and thrilled to count you among them.
Well, you are a blessing yourself, and I cherish our friendship more than you'll ever know. You're a very wise soul, and it's a treat to have you as my guest tonight. Because of that, because you have a lot of wisdom, and you also have a lot of grace. And it's a pleasure to share that with my viewers, to get to see that side of you that I get to see every day. So where can viewers find you? How can they contact you?
I'm Joanne at Zenspirations.com, and that's Zenspirations. Or I just launched a new website called When You Lose Someone, and it has resources both for people who are grieving and for people who are supporting someone as they go on their own grief journey. And there's a contact button, and you can write to me there. Or
Wonderful.
Come visit me in Orlando.
What's that?
Come visit me in Orlando.
In Orlando, because you don't like to go any place that's not warm.
You know me well.
So thank you, Joanne. I appreciate you joining me tonight. And thank you for being a voice of hope. People who lose a spouse have dynamics that other losses don't face. And so by sharing it so authentically and candidly with our viewers, I think that just that alone helps people not feel alone, and that gives them hope. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to see you. And I love you. And we'll see you next time. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Take care, Joanne.
Love you.
Bye. Love you too. Bye-bye.